Hi, this is the next installment in the Holy Spirit Play and Liberation videos that we're doing based on some writing I did a couple years ago and research. So I want to dig into this a little more about the concept of play and that my contention that gifts like speaking in tongues do something very particular around sustaining the centrality of play and how God can empower us in play. We've already talked about play and common grace aspects, like we experience with a game or a good art experience where we can get caught up into that. I want to read to you a quote from a guy named Peter Althaus, who talks about the what's happening in terms of worship and spirit-filled worship, and what are we aiming for in that, or what can happen in that? What's the potentiality there? And he talks about play as both being structured and unstructured. Obviously, structured play in normal life, we think of a game with rules, and good rules allow us, if we have them internalized, to actually enjoy the game more and detach more from our normal non-play life while we're in the game. And of course, things can interrupt that and pull us back out of that in a game. And you get an important phone call or somebody runs in who's not part of the game and needs something. But then you can go back into it, and sort of the rules, the boundaries, the structures of that kind of play help us engage in the play more freely. There's also unstructured play, by the way, and think about just drawing. If you're listening to something and you doodle and that's an unstructured kind of experience, obviously inspired by all of the input that you're having around you. Sometimes your mind wanders into totally new directions as well. Think about the difference between a structured piece of music and jazz. Of course, jazz has within it structures that are taken and riffs and scales and so forth, but there's a certain element of unstructured in that as well. So structured play can be both structured and unstructured, and usually is a combination of both. There's another word about what happens, by the way, when we enter into this state, when you get caught up in something where your sense of time is different, your sense of yourself is different when you're in that play. A nice fancy word for that is called liminality. And that word simply is about this idea of being on a line between two different experiences, as it were, or modes of being. And so liminality is this location between, and sort of that land that we enter into between two places. And there's something special about that and unique about that, crossing over and back in whatever that boundary zone is between normal life and play life. And liminality can speak to spiritual experiences and many different other things. Althaus says this about liminality. He says it's a kind of anti-structure in which profane social relationships are set aside, rights and obligations are suspended. So you're different when you're entering into that zone in terms of how you relate to others, particularly in play. And he says this: participants engage in a sacred complex episodes of sacred space and time through subversive, playful events. Think about how protest works. Think about how art works in terms of speaking to power structures and things that we think are so given. Those are liminal experiences that we can enter into as well. So these are playful events, and he says this anti-structure is capable of storing alternative models of reality that can influence mainstream social structures and direct social change. This anti-structure, what happens in liminal places, like when we engage in play, is capable of storing alternative models of reality. Our imagination, which is not just make-believe, but possibilities that are currently seem closed, that can influence mainstream, meaning our non-play, when we leave that state life, social structures and direct social change. There's something empowering in being caught up in that. And so this play element of Christianity in particular, we begin to name this inspiration through Jesus and the Holy Spirit, can bring about empowerment for the person and transformation. So when we talk about things like speaking in tongues, I think this is perhaps the highest value of that in terms of learning the experience of play and how play can empower us. We can experience union with God. We can experience this sort of mystical encounter that most Christians have talked about throughout the ages. We can experience words and new images, the prophetic in that as well. One author puts it this way: to have God's Spirit is to be empowered. The promise of the prophet Joel to the Judean people who were weak and powerless and helpless in the Old Testament, Joel chapter 2. So this word is the main interpretive text for the pouring out of the Holy Spirit in the New Testament. So in the Old Testament, Joel's prophecy is taken back up. What we celebrate this Sunday in Pentecost, again, is the interpretive text. Joel's prophecy hints at the future. And the New Testament, the event of the pouring out of the Spirit, includes this language, the use of tongues, and it's an empowerment that brings inclusion and tears down walls for people. And it begins wholesale in Acts chapter 10, as you're reading through, where privileges of power and access are opened up to everybody, evidenced by the play of the Holy Spirit, and particularly gifts like tongues. Guys like Simon Chan and Wolfgang Bondy in Beyond Pentecostalism, as well as Jean-Jacques Sermon and others, emphasize the role of play in spirit-filled theology, or lowercase p Pentecostal theology. Stephen Land writes about this, and Bondy reflects on what he wrote, and he says this, that improvisation points us to the importance of integrating orthodoxy, orthopraxy, and orthopathy. Orthodoxy, sort of the right glory, right belief, or orthopraxy, meaning like right practice, and orthopathy, meaning like how our emotions are shaped and formed. That all of those are important, and play speaks to that. Also talks about this role of imagination. It says this, in the play of the imagination, theology expands to the realm of the good, the real good, the holy, and the beautiful, that enter into the world through visions, dreams, and prophecies. And he says this, habits of orthopathy that are objective, relational, and dispositional operations of the Holy Spirit in the Christian life. So we're being caught up into this thing, and in that we experience a new reality that also becomes objective and pushes us into our relationships in new ways. And so we want to understand this concept of play, and we want to unpack that more in these videos in terms of what the Holy Spirit does in gifts like speaking in tongues, that it sustains. It's a place where you can enter into play easily, and you're empowered with that, and that is part of what makes it powerful. If we're judging things like speaking in tongues by cognitive like information that is easily understandable, we're actually missing the boat by a million miles. It's about empowerment, direct empowerment, being caught up in that, and then coming out of that into non-play life with a new sense of empowerment, regardless of one's circumstances. Let me see here. Let me read one more. Vondi has one more quote that I want to share with you before I close this one. The freedom of play is a significant aspect of the spirit-filled life, or what we might call Pentecostal spirit-filled theology. It emphasizes that theological pursuit cannot be pure performance. In play, properly speaking, there is no audience. It's not a dramatic act, but it's an invitation to participate in something, shared experience with others, spiritual, intellectual, and even celebration of good ethics. It's not aimed at a performance to non-players. It's interested in playing with others, not for others. This is another key aspect of play in terms of spiritual gifts. It calls us into community with others, more than an entertainment experience where we're standoff. Okay, I know that's a lot. We'll unpack that a little more to come. But again, my contention is this. Gifts like speaking in tongues are like the excellent example or tool or gift of the Spirit. Tools, maybe the wrong word to use, but it is the excellent gift that sustains play, because it's all about bringing us into a different kind of experience that seems nonsensical on one level, but actually is functioning at a very deep level to empower us and free us. All right, more to come. If that one was a bit deep, I'll try to dial it down a little bit next time. Have a good one.